Cannabis Caucus Chair for the Harvey Milk Club, and worked with the club on supporting compassionate care for low-income patients and several other issues with compassionate care over the last, I don't know, way too many years. So tonight I'm coming before you to talk about a state ballot for cannabis, medical cannabis, and hemp called the MCLR 2016. And there's a few things that I want to talk about just within my own personal journey that are really significant with this. The first thing that is very historic about this state ballot initiative, it is the first initiative in California history that was done via open source. So we went on April 20th, commonly known as 420, a big celebration in cannabis communities, to the state capitol. And then we went to Hippie Hill, but at first we were in Sacramento, and we filed our state initiative. And being open source wasn't just the only thing that really came in with the process. With this process, we have a really diverse group across the state working together and taking input from anybody and everybody, and it's still a living document, so you can still plug in. We're going to do another filing. We just recently refiled, and we're going to do yet again another filing, and we're really hoping to start really bringing in a larger state cooperation. And the interesting thing is, tonight we were supposed to have a steering committee meeting, and we were all actually invited in different cities across the state to present to Democratic clubs. So we actually all canceled our meeting, and we're actually doing what we should be doing, which is bringing on board the Democratic clubs across our state. The great benefit to this for my personal journey, which has been a lot of equal access to low-income medical cannabis patients, which I've had the complete support of the Harvey Milk Club across almost a decade now of our efforts to have equity and safe access. And when I started looking at the different groups that were working on state policy, I did not find a home with really any of the lobbyist groups that were working who were interested in putting anything into their legislation or their proposed law about equity and safe access to low-income patients, to veterans, etc. When we all know here in San Francisco, we started a movement from people that needed medical cannabis. So when I started working with this group, they were very open about it, and as a matter of fact, they all sat down with me and were like, okay, how do we create equity and safe access and put this into a statewide proposal? And so one of the solutions that we came about was a designated in our entry levels of how people register their cannabis projects. We have a compassionate caregiver entry, which decreases some of the registration costs for these collectives that are willing to give a percentage of their gardens to people who cannot afford their medicine, because often when, I'm sure I don't need to tell people, but often when you become sick, you don't have gainful means to purchase your medical cannabis, and it becomes yet another barrier to your healthcare choices. So when we made that designation and it kept sticking and this group kept supporting that, I was definitely like, okay, I'm going to commit a lot of my time and a lot of my care to this. And we have several proponents that are activists in the LGBT community in San Francisco, and active Milk Club members. Denise Story is a proponent. Gilbert Condeo is a proponent. We also have a former chair of our anti-displacement caucus many moons ago, Gregory Ledbetter, is also a proponent. We have a very high-ranking cannabis lawyer, Omar Figueroa, who's also become a proponent. And he also has a state initiative about artesian cultivators. So meaning the people that are really producing the nice, loved on, magical medicine, not the large crop. And we need all models really to succeed in California. And what we don't want to see is a repeat of Washington State, where now basically groups of patients are no longer allowed to grow for each other. And there's a sort of methodology in some of the lobbyist groups to take away the rights of patients and put this really in the industry hands and say, oh, well, the safest place for this is out of the people's hands and into the hands of these sort of big producers. And Washington State recently actually closed all of their medical dispensaries. So there is urgency in sort of building the momentum around a fair policy. And it's still open sourced, and we have upcoming on June 18th, we have an open source teleconference. So a lot of times when people work on policy, they have these sort of closed invite only teleconferences that only policy heads can attend, you know, and kind of wonk the policy. And every step this group takes seems to be so transparent and inclusive that I'm really proud to be a part of the team, and I'm really hoping to engage members of the Harvey Milk Club to join the conversation on June 18th, learn a little bit more about the team, and of course, hopefully, we'd like to gain your endorsement. And we're going to be at the High Times Cup, which will be June 20th at the Cow Palace. So if you enjoy cannabis, that's definitely an event to get to. And some of the other components of this piece that are really important to the growers is that we have incorporated a lot of attorney Omar Figueroa, and Heather Burke is also an attorney who put forth an initiative to protect our artesian growers in California. We have some of the best growers in the world, and we want to have sort of repository genetics bank, much like how France kind of coined the wines. We want to be the ones to have that repository for our beautiful artesian cannabis in California. So when we look at who benefits from this, really everyone does, and everyone can be a part of this. And for me, that's a lot of what I've been working on in general in policy, is an inclusive process and a process that brings everybody to the table. And that's how we come up with the best policies. So I have a handout. I think I got it out there. We've been working on this since 2013. 2014, nobody really got to the ballot. We do have some stuff going on in the state houses right now, but it is all extremely restrictive. What they're looking at is what they call, quote unquote, resolving medical cannabis in the state house, so that the larger groups can just take on the legalization aspect of it. And it's kind of sad, because when you look at it, what they did the last session of Assembly is that they combined Steve Cooley's bill, which comes from the police chiefs, with the bill from the industry under Rob Bonta, and said, here, you guys all work together on one bill to restrict medical cannabis. So while I'll be working on bringing forward and bringing everyone into the MCLR and getting this to the voters, there's a real reason why we want to get it to the voters. We don't want it resolved extremely restrictive towards the patients and the small growers by our assembly. We want it something solid with a vote of all Californians being able to cast their vote. So I'll be coming more, speaking more about it, and please, if you're interested in joining the teleconference on the 18th, I will get the information to the PAC chairs, and would love if any past presidents, anybody that would like to come into the conversation that can, you know, really lend a hand on helping build something powerful. Is there any questions?
Yeah.
Yes?
So these are the points of what what SB 566 would entail?
Oh, no,
Because-
SB 566 is the hemp bill, so this includes,
Yeah, because I see some things here that, okay, like prohibit state and local governments from enforcing federal prohibitions of marijuana, and you know, everybody knows federal supersedes state and local, so I'm just really wondering how would one prohibit something that supersedes you? So that's a question going on in my mind.
okay.
And then over here, there's another one where no individual can be denied a license or permit for engaging in lawful marijuana-related activities, such as. I mean,
That is
I
loose,
mean,
huh?
what is marijuana-related activities?
Well,
You know?
so let me start with your first question. So currently, right now, we also have moves at the Senate level and the congressional level of having the federal government stay out of the medical cannabis states. We have, you know, 25 states. I think that the people have really spoken in this country from the states that support this, that we don't want the federal government getting involved. So there's already sort of different support levels that are coming in on that level. And as far as marijuana-related activities, I think we're talking about dispensaries, cultivation projects, small bakeries, anything that, you know, is basically for cannabis production, sharing, or distribution.
Okay, just wondering.
No, that's a great question. Dan?
Somewhere it said here that some people would not have to pay taxes. And how do you determine who's who?
So this would not place a tax on medical cannabis. So if you are a medical cannabis patient, currently you are paying a tax on your medication if you go to one of our local dispensaries. This would say, if you're a cannabis patient, no, this is your medicine,
Well, who determines if you're a cannabis patient?
your physician,
Oh,
Recommendation, not
Yeah.
prescription.
your
Prescrip-
physician, definitely.
Tell the difference
And,
between prescription and recommendation.
There's a difference between a prescription and a recommendation currently. So a recommendation is different than a prescription. Prescription outlines basically like how much, quantity, etc. Recommendation is similar to what your doctor would say is, you know, you should take a multivitamin. It's a recommendation, it's written.
Like folk medicine rather than having the
The FDA.
The FDA,
Yes. So
the Federal Drug
if
Administration.
you have one of these, which Jesus
As?
Yay!
passed forward, you would not be paying the taxes. And if you are a social user or a therapeutic user of cannabis, then you would go ahead and pay the taxes to help us with the schools. One of the things that the MCLR does is it takes a percentage of these taxes to very worthy causes, including supporting nonprofits that are engaged in recreation for minorities. So, of course, the history of cannabis has a very racist history of who gets arrested, a very classist history of who gets arrested and put in jail for cannabis. So one of the balancing acts from the tax resources would go to supporting nonprofits and also supporting our colleges. And it was interesting when we filed our petition on 420, we happened to coincide outside the state building with a demonstration of the UC Student Union, and we got a lot of support. They're like, "What are you guys here for?" And we're like, "Well, we're here for cannabis," and they're like, "Awesome!" And so there's all these pictures of us with all these college kids. So it was great. And then when they found out that part of the tax resources would go to making tuition affordable to our students in California, we got a lot of appreciation. So are there any other questions or concerns?
Oh, what does our opposition look like? I mean, do we have other guys proposing other stuff?
Well, currently there's some lobbyist groups that are going to reveal a policy maybe at some point. You know, it's very murky. We've asked for transparency. They are going around and they're having gatherings and of select stakeholders and getting some feedback. But generally, what we're finding this month is that a lot of those same people are going, this is a great working outline, let's all cooperate. And, you know, there might still be some holdouts, there might be still some lobbyists whose, you know, bread and butter hangs on getting their clients' stuff through. But I think the majority of the cannabis community wants reasonable regulation and wants a cooperative effort so that we can all get behind one thing. And for me, the group that started open source, that continues to be open source, that continues to include everybody and look out for the low-income patient straight to the artisan grower, it seems like a no-brainer. I'm sorry, sir, you had a...
Oh yeah, I looked up the answer and I got my question answered. I was kind of wondering about like the tax rate as compared to what Colorado and Washington have done. And I know it says here that Colorado collects a 15% excise tax, and then a 10% state tax on retail. And in addition to a state sales tax of 2.9, so we're talking like already a 27.9% tax that they do. And I haven't read it terribly closely, but it looks like the tax here would be 10%. Is there a reason why it'd be so much lower?
I think that we want a workable situation, and I think that while there's good things about what's happened in Colorado as far as public policy, we have a lot less drunk driving, we have a lot less domestic violence, we have, you know, I mean, these are huge, major social changes that have made shifts, but on the other hand, when you make medicine really expensive, sometimes you end up supporting the alternative. I don't like to use the word black market because I think it's kind of yucky, but the outside of the legitimate legal market, you tend to support that by having things be expensive to the consumer. And so having something that's reasonable to the consumer but is still able to fund all of the worthy things that we've broken off into percentages where the taxes would go seems more reasonable to me. But again, it's a living document, and if you have input on the tax level, which isn't necessarily my expertise, my expertise is more as a patient advocate and the needs of low-income patients, but we do have people at the table that are more brainiacs around the tax levels and et cetera, and I encourage you to participate if you see a way that we can tweak it a little bit.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, you're a very able spokesperson, regardless of any ways in which you don't feel like you're qualified on the tax side. Like, you're a very able spokesperson.
Well, thank you. I was a little bit nervous about speaking tonight, so that was nice to hear.
Yeah.
Denise?
Talk about driving under the influence of cannabis, where they're more open-minded about metabolites and unmetabolized cannabis, and as opposed to other ballot initiatives, which they kind of have a set rule about driving. So
Yeah, DUI is a big deal with sort of our, if you want to talk about our social opposition, one of the things that the Interfaith Council, the police chiefs will zone in on is they have this fear that everybody's going to be smoking joints and driving cars. And
Indica.
you want to say, well, everybody's been doing that in California for 20 years, but a lot of the sort of knee-jerk reaction from some of the groups has been to make it a more scientific dial in on what would constitute a DUI. And I think, Denise, you put it very eloquently, and you're a proponent, so please go ahead and speak to it.
Oh, well, while we were on the conference call, I kind of was worn out. I didn't get the whole conversation about it, but I took notes on it. I didn't bring them with me. But the main part of what I was saying is they wanted to define driving under the influence, the guidelines for how they catch you. I have a suggestion. Don't arrest anybody for driving on sativa, just indica. Maybe there's a way they can tell.
Well, I think what, the basic concern is that we already have laws for reckless driving.
Yeah.
And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And if somebody is recklessly driving on a substance, we already have laws that address that. We don't need to, and we've gone over and over it at the state level where, the police unions and et cetera want to kind of dial in a really sort of draconian concept. But the truth is that we know in states like Colorado and Washington and states that have fully legalized, the drunk driving accidents actually go down. So we're looking at actually saving lives when people have an alternative social therapeutic outlet where, maybe they're able to go and have a glass of wine, but also medicate with cannabis and be able to drive better, and we're having less incidences and we're having less domestic violence incidences. This is all good. This is a societal shift.
Well, a lot of these laws are making
Alex?
Sorry.
I don't remember the parameters of the study, but I read about a study where they had three groups of people they were analyzing. One group, they allowed to drink alcohol before they drove. The other one, cannabis, and the control group was sober. And it showed that people who were smoking cannabis generally drove slower and rated themselves as being more impaired than they actually were on the test.
I've heard there's a study out of, I think, France. As well that emphasizes that the safety concerns are probably misplaced. And I think we, early on in San Francisco when we were talking about the permitting issues and we were before the planning commission, we had a planning commissioner, Antonini, who's a dentist by trade, and I think he kept thinking of cannabis as being like when he put people under to take out a tooth, and he was very concerned about people driving from the cannabis clubs. But I think people that have more experience with cannabis cultures have less concerns about the driving issues and are more realistic that it's not the major concern. But, of course, the police chiefs will bring it up.
Our brain on cannabis is just fine.
Well, I want to thank everybody for giving me the moment to speak, and I encourage people to join our teleconference on June 18th. I'll get the information and the call-in number to join, and the minute we get ready for endorsements, I'll be back.
Yay.
So June 18th?
June 18th, yes.
Okay.
Gilbert, did you?
Oh, I wanted to add a comical story for my personal testimony. I was a crane operator in the Navy. I was 18, right? And I sustained a back injury. A cable broke, hit me in the back. They were supposed to discharge me on the medical discharge, but since I was their best crane operator, they looked the other way. They do that, whatever, But anyway, the thing is that I was smoking hash in the Navy, running a 40-ton crane, and you know how it says on the late medications, they do not operate heavy machinery. Well, I broke all their records. I didn't have any accidents. I mean, I think it depends on the individual. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to be a athlete in high school. I was very coordinated in all kinds of sports and everything. But anyway, I broke the record and I tested 30. They piss tested everybody, right, on the ship. And I know I tested 30 because I had been smoking hash all week long. We had just gone to Amsterdam. Anyway, the captain looked the other way. And I know they what's the report because the guy that tested me, the chemist on the ship, he was always giving me dirty looks like, I know you're dirty, but the captain said to look the other way. So this thing about cannabis is dangerous to operate heavy machinery, not in all cases. If people, I'm proof of that. The Navy has proof of that. In Vietnam, they used cannabis for PTSD right there, right when it was happening. And the Army didn't start throwing people out for smoking cannabis. There were people doing worse. They were shooting up heroin. But anyway, the thing is that the government has all the data on how it helps you. They're just being jerks because we're just being ruled by jerks. The Republicans do crazy things that we don't understand sometimes.
Wives' tales.
Just a quick moment here. Do we have something from the My Name Is campaign